Welcome everyone to this insightful lecture on the concept of corrective justice, meaning and analysis. I am Dr. Simranjeet Kaur, professor at the School of Law, City University, Ludhiana, Punjab. Today, we will explore one of the fundamental principles of justice that plays a crucial role in legal and philosophical discourse, corrective justice. This concept has deep roots in the classical philosophy, particularly in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and continues to be the guiding principle in the modern legal system, especially in the tort law. By the end of this lecture, you will gain an understanding of the fundamental meaning and significance of corrective justice, Aristotle's perspective on corrective justice, and its distinction from distributive justice. The principles underlying corrective justice in the legal theory and its application in the tort law. The key difference between the corrective justice and distributive justice. How corrective justice influences the legal remedies and judicial decisions. After completing this lecture, you should be able to define and explain the concept of corrective justice, analyze the Aristotle's contribution to the theory of the corrective justice, differentiate between the corrective justice and the distributive justice, understand the application of the corrective justice in the tort law and the other legal framework, critically evaluate the strengths and limitations of the corrective justice in contemporary legal contexts. So, let's start exploring this interesting topic. Corrective justice is the idea that liability rectifies the injustice inflicted by the way of one individual on another. This idea obtained its classical wording in the Aristotle's treatment of justice in Nicomachean Ethics, Book 5. More recently, it has become primary to the modern theories of the private regulations. As its name indicates, corrective justice has rectificatory characteristics. By correcting the injustice that the defendant has inflicted on the plaintiff, corrective justice assert a connection between the treatment and the incorrect. Aristotle takes up corrective justice, that part of the precise justice that is concerned with the rectification of injustices from what he calls interactions among the persons. Aristotle by no means spell out just what interactions are. However, he does mention that interactions may be voluntary or involuntary. Analysis of the concept of corrective justice. Aristotle's account presents corrective and distributive justice as two contrasting forms of the justice. Corrective justice, which offers with the voluntary and the involuntary transactions, the time being contracts and the torts, focuses on whether one group has dedicated and the alternative has suffered a transactional injustice. Distributive justice cope with the distribution of anything which is divisible. Aristotle mentions honors and the goods between the competitors in the political community. For Aristotle, justice in both these structures relate one individual to any other in accordance with the theory of equality or honestness. The Greek of aniosion connotes the each. Aristotle accounts make it clear that this rectification approach correlatively on the two groups. A remedy directed at only one of the parties does no longer agree to the corrective justice. For the court, merely to get rid of the defendant's wrongful advantage does no longer suffice, because then the plaintiff is left nevertheless suffering a wrongful loss. Nor does it suffice for the court only to make acceptable the plaintiff's loss, for then the defendant is left still enjoying his or her wrongful gain. The remedy consists in simultaneously removing the defendant's excess and making the rights that plaintiff's deficiency. Justice is thereby achieved for both events by way of a single operation, wherein the plaintiff recovers exactly what the defendant is made to surrender. From these features of corrective justice remedy that it answers to the injustice and is correlative structured. A third follows. Correlatively structured remedy respond to an unjust and injustice merely if that injustice is itself correlatively structured. In bringing an action in opposition to the defendant, the plaintiff is maintaining that the two are connected as door and sufferers of the equal injustice. What the defendant has carried out, what the plaintiff has suffered, are not independent events. Rather, they are the similar and opposite poles of the same injustice. In order that what a defendant has performed counts as an injustice merely because of what the defendant has suffered and vice versa. The law then rectifies this justice by reversing its active and passive poles, so that the doer of injustice will become the victim of the regulation's remedy. Only due to the fact that injustice is the identical from both the facets does the remedy manage with the party as correctively situated. Thus, in the course of the transaction from the incidence of injustice to its rectification, party's role is normatively significant only through the location of the other, that is, the mirror. Corrective justice is the theoretical construct that highlights the function of the correlativity as the organizing concept implicit inside the dating between the plaintiff and the defendant. The regulative function of the corrective justice is likewise reflected within the evolution with the distributive justice. Corrective and distributive justice express categorically different structures of the justification. Corrective justice links the doer and the sufferers of an injustice in the terms of their correlative positions. Distributive justice, on the opposite sides, offers with the sharing of an advantage or burden. It involves comparing the potential party to the distribution in phrases of a distributive criteria. Instead of linking one faction to another as door and the sufferer, distributive justice connects all parties via the benefit or the burden they all share. The categorical differences between the correlatively and the comparison is made clean in the distinction between the numbers of the party that everyone admits. Corrective justice connects two events and no extra due to the fact a relationship of correlativity is necessarily bipolar. Supporters of the standard interpretation take this to be the simple, straightforward manner of understanding what the lordship does. He equalizes while removing what is multiple party ought to have of something and then returns this, the good taken away to the other fraction, thereby restoring each to the position they had before the inequality has to be created. If so, Aristotle's thesis of the correction may be embarrassingly simplistic, but it's far undeniably a structure of rectifying by compensating the injured party. But even if accepting of the usual interpretation is widespread, it is not universal. Years ago, J. Barnett scoffed at what even then he stated turned into the common view, calling it a childish doctrine instead of the returning the fraction of a few pre-interplay equality. According to the Barnett, corrective justice operates in a very different way depending on whether or not it's far carried out to a voluntary or involuntary interactions. When implemented to the former, it needs that the honest worth of the produce to be exchanged be determined earlier of the exchange, and this provides the degree which to choose whether what every affection is soliciting for is just. Regarding involuntary interaction, according to the Burnett, Aristotle distinguishes between a harm, probably a substantial loss of some sort, and an injustice, probably a damage specified by the law. Corrective justice, that the offender suffers a punishment equal to what is the arithmetical means among the actual harm suffered by the sufferer and the wrong done, which can be extra or much less critical than the damage. So, for the Burnett, corrective justice is by the functional. It operates in exceptional ways, relying on whether or not the inequality to be corrected includes a voluntary or an involuntary interplay. Corrective justice is a fundamental concept in the field of tort law, and it refers to the idea that justice involves rectifying wrongs or imbalances that occurs between the individual due to the wrongful acts. The concept is primarily concerned with restoring the injured party to the position they were in before the harm occurred by correcting the wrong done to them. Corrective justice focus on individual relationship between the wrongdoer, the tortfeasor, and the victim. It is based on the ideas of the fairness and equity, seeking to restore the balances between the parties and addressing the wrong that was committed. The key features of the corrective justice are restoration of the balance. Corrective justice seeks to restore the fairness by unholding the harm caused by the wrongful act. This can be through the compensation, restitution, or other forms of repair. It aims to correct the imbalance created when one party wrongfully interferes with the rights or interests of another. Focus on the individual. The primary focus of corrective justice is on the relationship between the tortfeasor and the victim. This contrasts with the distributive justice, which is concerned with the fair distribution of resources across the society at large. Corrective justice emphasizes the rectification of the specific harm done to an individual rather than broader societal goals. Principle of reciprocity. Corrective justice operates on the idea that a person who harms another should provide the compensation or restitution in a way that restores justice between the two individuals. In this sense, it is often viewed as a form of reciprocal justice. If someone wrongs another, corrective justice demands that wrongdoer make amends in an appropriate manner. Equality between the parties. One of the central principles of the corrective justice is the idea of equality. The tortfeasor and the victim should be brought to a state of balance, where neither party suffers a loss beyond what is necessary. The compensation or the restitution should ideally be equal to the harm caused, ensuring that the victim is not overcompensated or undercompensated. Corrective justice versus distributive justice. When we talk about the distributive justice, this is the concept that resources, benefits, or burdens should be distributed in a fair and equitable manner among all the members of the society, often based on need, merit, or contribution. Corrective justice. In contrast, corrective justice is more concerned with fixing wrongs between individuals. It focuses on the relationships between the person who wronged another and the person who was wronged, aiming to restore the fairness in those specific interactions. For example, if someone causes harm to another person by negligence or intentional actions, corrective justice aims to correct the specific harm caused to that person by restoring them through the compensation or other means to the position they were in the prior to the wrongdoing. Corrective justice in the tort law. In the context of the tort law, corrective justice is the underlying principle that justifies the imposition of the liability on the tortfeasor, the wrongdoer. The tort law is often viewed as a way to correct the wrongful acts and provide redress to the victims. Key examples includes negligence. If a person is harmed because of another's negligence, for example, a car accident, corrective justice demands that the negligent party compensate the injured party for the loss or harm they suffered. Intentional torts. In case of intentional harm, that's assault or defamation, corrective justice required that the wrongdoer restore balance by compensating the victim for the harm done. Strict liability. In some cases, even if there is no fault on the part of the tortfeasor, corrective justice may still demand compensation if harm occurs, as in the case of strict liability. For example, product defects, dangerous activities. Philosophical foundations, the concept of corrective justice has been heavily influenced by the ancient and the modern philosophical thinkers. Aristotle, in his Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle presented the idea of rectificatory justice, which is conceptually similar to the modern corrective justice. He emphasizes the need for restoring the fairness between the individual when there is an imbalance caused by the wrongdoings. John Rawls, through primarily associated with the distributive justice, Rawls' theory of justice as a fairness also touches on the corrective justice, particularly in the terms of restoring fairness when the injustice have been done. Theories of responsibilities. Philosophers have debated the relationship between the corrective justice and the notion of responsibility. Some argue that a person who causes harm must take responsibility for the consequences of their action. Further, justifying corrective measure such as compensation. Critiques of the corrective justice. While corrective justice is widely accepted principle, it has also faced some criticism as well. Overemphasize on the individual relationship. Critiques argue that corrective justice is too narrow because it focuses on individual cases of harm rather than addressing broader societal issues such as systematic inequality or the public policy concerns. For example, a system that focuses solely on compensating victims in the specific cases may overlook larger issues of the social injustice. Lack of consideration for the moral guilt. Corrective justice focuses on the repair of the harm, but some critics point out that it does not always account for the moral culpability of the wrongdoer. In other words, it may not always ensure that those who intentionally harm others are appropriately punished or held morally accountable for their actions. Difficulty in measuring harms. Corrective justice requires assessing the harm caused by the wrongdoing and determining the appropriate remedy. However, in many cases, this can be difficult. How does one determine the precise value of harm caused by the emotional distress or intangible losses? Corrective justice in the broader legal system. Although corrective justice is mostly commonly discussed in the context of tort law, its principles can also extend into other areas of the law, which is called contract law. If a party breaches a contract, corrective justice can be invoked to restore the balance by enforcing the terms of the contract or awarding the damages. Criminal law. Some view restorative justice as a form of the corrective justice, wherein the criminal justice system works not only to punish but also to repair the harm caused to the victim and reintegrate the wrongdoer into the society. Tort law as a corrective justice. The notion of the corrective justice stems from Aristotle's distinction among the distributive or corrective justice. Distributive justice addresses the problem of ways of the advantages of a well classified society ought to be disbursed amongst its members. Corrective justice, on the other hand, is concerned with the nearby or temporary restoration inside the distributive schemes. If A takes a loaf of the bread from the B with the aid of violence or stealth, then the corrective justice required that an adjustment be made in the desire of the B. Aristotle's notion was that the adjustments have to be arithmetic within the perception that we look a measure what A gained and what B lost, with the view closer to the restoring the stability among them. Further, he believed that problems of corrective justice have to be weighed independently of any concern for distributive questions. Tort cases emerging from the unintentional injuries may be understood an issue in the corrective justice. Issues B, alleging that an event happened where A and B have been each concerned, and that within the course of this prevalence, A's health, wealth, or happiness has been unjustly diminished via B. Tort cases are neighborhood inside the sense that they focus upon the equities created by the single event or by way of the chain of the related events. A corrective justice explanation for the tort law has a strong initiative basis. If one party wrongfully injures any other, our innermost intuitions appear to argue that justice requires a remedy. Furthermore, the pursuit of justice in itself a criticism's aim and one which has strong justificatory force in the preserving public institutions. In concluding remarks, corrective justice serve as a cornerstone of the legal philosophy, ensuring that individuals who suffer harm due to the wrongful acts receive adequate redress. Rooted in the Aristotle's Nicomachean ethics, this concept remains central to the modern legal system, particularly in the tort law, where it functions as a mechanism for rectifying the imbalances between the individuals by focusing on the fairness and restoration of a equilibrium. Corrective justice emphasizes the direct relationship between the wrongdoer and the victim, ensuring that the harm inflicted is appropriately addressed. One of the defining aspects of the corrective justice is its emphasis on the individual responsibility. Unlike distributive justice, which seeks to be allocate resources fairly across the society, corrective justice focuses on the specific transaction or interaction where harm has been inflicted. This principle ensures that justice is not abstract but applied in a tangible manner, directly benefiting those who have suffered loss. It reinforces the idea that justice is not only about enforcing the laws but also about upholding ethical principles that govern interpersonal relations. Furthermore, corrective justice operates under the principle of reciprocity. It mandates that individual who commits wrongful acts compensate their victims in the manner proportionate to the harm they have caused. This principle upholds the moral and ethical integrity of the legal system, ensuring that justice is not arbitrary but it's rooted in the well-defined structure of the fairness. The balance sought through the corrective justice is not merely punitive but a restorative, aiming to return both parties to their rightful positions. The application of the corrective justice in the tort law is particularly significant. Tort law serve as the legal framework through which individuals can seek redress for the wrongs committed against them, whether in the case of negligence, intentional harm, or strict liability. Tort law ensure that those responsible for causing harm are held accountable. This accountability is crucial in maintaining social order, as it deters the individuals from engaging its reckless or harmful behavior. Without the corrective function of the tort law, individuals would have little legal resource to address the personal grievances, leading to a breakdown in the social harmony. Additionally, corrective justice influences the judicial decisions in making. Courts rely on this principle to determine appropriate remedies for the victims, ensuring that compensation is fair and proportionate. This legal philosophy ensures that justice is not arbitrary but follows a structured approach that takes into account the specific of each case. By considering the factors such as intent, severity of the harm, and impact on the victim, court can tailor their decisions to uphold the justice in a meaningful way. Despite its strengths, corrective justice is not without limitation. One major challenge lies in quantifying harm and determining appropriate compensation in the cases involving emotional distress or loss of reputation. It can be difficult to assign a precise monetary value to the damage suffered. Additionally, the principle of corrective justice may not always be sufficient in addressing systematic inequalities, as it primarily deals with the individual cases rather than the broader societal issues. For this reason, it is often complemented by the distributive justice, which seeks to address the structural imbalances in the society. In conclusion, corrective justice remains a fundamental principle in the legal theory and the practice, ensuring that individuals who suffer harm receive just compensation. By emphasizing fairness, reciprocity, and individual responsibility, it provides a structured approach to rectifying wrongs and maintaining the social order. While it has certain limitation, its role in the tort law and judicial decision making is indispensable. By continuing to define and apply this principle effectively, legal system can uphold the justice in the manner that is both fair and equitable. I hope this lecture has provided you with valuable insight into the concept of corrective justice. Thank you so much for watching this program.